We're joined by PRASA spokesperson Andiswa Makhanda. Ms. Makhanda, thank you for being with us. Let's start with what PRASA is disputing. You say that, in fact, it was the former CEO, Zolani Matthews, who signed this deal, so it wasn't a rushed thing with the new CEO, and it was above board and due process was followed.
Good evening, Francis, and good evening to your viewers. If I may take a step back, in May 2021, we had approached the National Treasury for an application for deviation. While Mr. Zolani Matthews was the CEO at the time, National Treasury approved the deviation. The locomotives contract, the leasing of the deal, was in actual fact signed in October 2021 with Mr. Matthews' signature. So in essence, the deal was not rushed. The leasing of the locomotives was not signed by David Mphelo as suggested by the Sunday Times.
Was he, as the new CEO, involved in this at all?
Not at all, because it was from the CEO himself, the then CEO, Mr. Zolani Matthews.
All right, then you don't dispute one of the big claims here is that these trains were bought, they were put on the tracks that weren't ready to run them.
Look, I must say that saying that they were not ready is inaccurate. What we can say that is that the rail was ready. However, we encountered some challenges when we moved past Kroonstad towards Bloemfontein. This is where there was vandalism and theft of overhead cables. And so during the train trip to the Eastern Cape, there was a lot of lower-hanging cables that made it very hazardous and unsafe for the trains to continue running on that track. So to say that the rail was not ready is slightly inaccurate. There were speed restrictions because a lot of our rail network has a bit of challenges. You know, they still need some refurbishment. So we did implement train restrictions moving from Johannesburg, and which the passengers were fine with that. We incorporated that in the travel distance duration. However, coming to Bloemfontein, it was a different story where there was a lot of theft and vandalism of the overhead cables.
Yeah, and can I stop you there? Was that a surprise to PRASA? Was that a surprise? Had the railway lines been checked?
Everything was checked, but the nature of theft and vandalism is that you fix it today, everything is sorted 2 days, 3 days down the line, or a day later, or even the night, the people come and steal and vandalize that infrastructure. One may be short of saying that it's clearly a sign of sabotage to some extent.
Okay, so that was new vandalism and infrastructural damage. The claim in the Sunday Times is that PRASA went ahead, even though PRASA's Mainline passenger services, which I understand actually operates these long-distance trains, said that the tracks were not ready. Is that true or not true?
No, the tracks were ready. What we did is, as a safety
My question
mechanism,
again, did the Mainline passenger services warn about these tracks or not? That's the claim.
No, there was no warning. The tracks were fine. The tracks were fine. We implemented speed restrictions where there were areas of concern, but it was ready to run. As a result, it moved from Johannesburg. It got to Bloemfontein. But from Bloemfontein, it's no longer our lines, it's the Transnet lines. But from Johannesburg to Bloemfontein, the trains ran.
All right, so there was no warning, as the Sunday Times reports, a warning from within PRASA that this wasn't a good idea.
No, we always have discussions around state of readiness. And so the state of rail is always discussed. If that's how they want to frame it as a warning, then that's up to the Sunday Times. But in terms of our operations and our technical teams, we made sure that the rail infrastructure was ready to move the trains safely. And that was what happened. From Park Station, the trains moved. They got to as far as Kroonstad, Bloemfontein. And that's where we interfaced with the Transnet lines, where there were a lot of cable theft. There was a lot of low-hanging wire that making it very unsafe for the trains to proceed. So trains had to wait and sit for technicians to come and remove the low-hanging wire. So that was one of the biggest reasons why there were delays to getting into the Eastern Cape.
Yeah. A lot of experts have argued, look, they're not within PRASA, neither am I, that because of vandalism and the destruction of infrastructure, which we know has been going on for years, it's been reported on for years, we know the state of various stations, you have to get the security right before you start spending money on the trains and reopening services. Your response to that?
And I get your question there, Francis, completely. It makes sense. It makes logical reason that we need to make sure that everything is up to scratch. The stations are ready. There's tight security. The fact of the matter is, Francis, is that the criminal syndicates, if I may call it that, they're very much advanced. We don't have enough capacity to cover each and every kilometer of railway. So we may make a deployment in one particular section of the railway line. Meanwhile, criminals are already vandalizing and stealing in another stretch of railway network. So it's always difficult to keep up with the criminal syndicates, because I would like to believe there's also intel, because they know that when we're fixing this side, there's no one watching that side. You go to that side, they're already stealing on another side, because it's thousands of kilometers of rail that we're talking about here. And so we need really a multidisciplinary approach with all the law enforcement agencies to be involved. It can't be the fight of PRASA security alone, because we're talking about thousands and thousands of kilometers of rail network.
The point is, surely that should be in place first. Is the Sunday Times not correct to point out that these trains were put on the tracks, even though these challenges, as you call them, could easily be envisaged?
We try all that we can to make sure that the security deployment. We've even intensified security deployment. Even Transnet on their end also have a security plan that they've also put in place. I think the issue of theft and vandalism affects all of our state entities. It's not just PRASA, it's not just Transnet. Eskom is also facing a similar challenges. It is clear that there's a criminal syndicate that's operating and making sure that it's sabotaging our rail infrastructure, And so coming to your question, Francis, is that what we are running is a social service. A lot of our passengers are from low-income households. They're already burdened by the high cost of bus fares.
Yes.
They are burdened by the high
Makhanda,
cost of taxis.
If I may butt in.
So let me finish, Francis. Sorry, Francis. I just need to make this point very clear. And so we are offering a service that is very affordable. Even our passengers were crying in tears on the first train, saying that thank goodness that there's a service that is affordable, because people had not gone home for a long time. They haven't been able to attend events because Eastern Cape is very far. The transport costs are very high. And so what we did, we had a risk mitigation plan. We had deployed security. We made sure that even the trains are escorted by security. We had a proper deployment. But as I said, yes, Francis.
I understand this argument. PRASA released this statement, but finally, you may have all the good intentions in the world, but is it true that those passengers were stuck for 19 hours on one train to East London, so they may have missed the events in any place, in any event? Isn't that the problem, that you didn't help in the end?
Let me put that figure into perspective. A train ride from Johannesburg to East London is perhaps 18 hours. And so when we say that there was trains arrived 24 hours later, we're talking about a 2-hour, 3 hours delay. And the reason for those delays is first because we had to wait for clearing of the lines in some instances. In other instances, we had to make sure that we dispatch alternative transport, which we used buses in that instance. And so there was a lot of movement in terms of waiting for the buses, clearing of the lines. And so there were delays, but a single trip to East London will take you roughly 18 hours, a trip to Port Elizabeth, roughly 19 hours. So when we talk about trains arrived or people reached their destinations 24 hours later because of those delays that were experienced.
Okay, so the Sunday Times actually said they were 19 hours late, but I hear what you're saying, and I wish we could talk about the buses and things. Thank you for your time, and we will follow the story. PRASA is saying that, in fact, the service is not going to be discontinued. Those trains will be back on the tracks.